So, in the age of political correctness, what's it like to work for a high-tech company in Silicon Valley? Is it really as bad as the James Damore Google memo saga would have you believe? A constant barrage of diversity training indoctrination in which we are told that women and minorities are prevented from achieving advancement in the workplace because of systemic racism and sexism embedded in these white supremacist capitalist patriarchal organisations? Do you have to watch every word you say lest you be guilty of a microaggression regardless of your intentions? Sounds a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? Well, maybe it isn't. The following is cut from one of Cassie Jay's Red Pill raw files, which are basically additional interviews and extended interviews that didn't make it into the film. This story with an ex-employee of Hewlett-Packard is quite startling and perhaps terrifying for anyone trying to navigate the minefield of political correctness in Silicon Valley. Without giving too much away, what this man's experience demonstrates is that regardless of your intentions, you can run afoul of the easily offended, and that can potentially affect your standing in the workplace and by implication, your career.
What we are doing this documentary about is something called the men's rights movement. Have you ever heard about that?
No, I haven't. What's that about?
Can you take a wild guess and think what it'd be about?
No, I don't think men have any rights anymore. So you've completely stumped me. Totally.
Men don't have any rights anymore?
I don't think so. I don't. It seems to me like we're being de-righted.
How so?
Well, because we have women's liberation, we have equal rights amendment, and a host of other things like that collectively formed to create a cloud of political correctness that exclude white men from participating fully in society, in my opinion.
Have you had personal experiences with this?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, for example, I was working in a Silicon Valley software company once, and I was discussing some technical stuff with a lady who was working there at the company, and I was trying to explain a technical problem that I was having with programming, and then I stopped myself because I was under the impression that she was in the marketing department. So I stopped myself before getting too technical, and I turned to her and I asked her, "You're an engineer, aren't you?" And she said yes. And it turned out that was not an appreciated question for me to ask, because she got the impression that I should have known that she was an engineer to begin with, even though she was working in the marketing department. And so that incident turned up in my yearly performance evaluation. So I pursued that because it wasn't my intent to demean her in any way. I just wanted to check just to make sure that she could understand the technical content of what I was about to explain to her. And I appealed it through my project manager, who was a woman. And when that failed, my section manager, who was a woman. And when that failed, the division manager, who was a woman. And all three appeals failed. And the incident remained reported on my performance evaluation. And I just felt disappointed because this was one of the premier companies in the United States to work for, and it wasn't what I thought I was signing up to do when I joined the company. That I had to watch every word, not just every sentence, but every question that I had to a person. And I always thought there's nothing wrong with asking a question, but in this case there was.
Wow, that's crazy.
Hewlett-Packard.
Is that why you left?
Probably one of the reasons why I left. I was getting tired of the politically correct scene, and I wasn't the only one in the company. I think a lot of us left. This was in the days before Carly Fiorina ruined the company. So, yeah, it was one of the reasons I left. Usually, when an issue like that happens, and you're working for a person who is an open-minded individual of either sex, you can just approach the individual, explain what happened, explain your side of the issue, and explain what you thought the other person's side of the issue might be, and express sympathy for the other person's point of view, and apologize, and that should be the end of it. But it wasn't the end of it in this case. So I was disappointed. And end of story. And I left the company.
Do you think it would have been different if that person working in marketing was a man and you asked, you're an engineer, right?
Yes. In my experience, some men get upset when you bring an issue to them, especially if they have strong feelings about the issue. So I can appreciate strong feelings. I can appreciate getting emotional temporarily about something that's essentially supposed to be a technical issue. But I think the ultimate purpose of a company, a corporation, is to be a profit-making vehicle. And I think that we have to be careful as individuals not to let our emotions control our lives. And that, I think, was a mistake that was made in my case with the incident that I described, and it just percolated right up the chain. And I don't think the men's point of view was necessarily represented, because in these days, in an organization, when a man has to work in the company with women, we have to stop and think of every gesture that we make, every word that we say, every question that we ask, and we have to stop and think, now, can this be potentially offensive? And in some cases, we're not going to be able to predict what the reaction of the woman might be, because there are some ways in which a woman can be offended that we will never be able to predict. And then we just run into this kind of black hole of a type of a situation where we get into a situation where we've suddenly become politically incorrect and offended somebody that we never intended to offend. And it makes life difficult, especially if you have to, bring home the bacon and that kind of thing, and put food on the table. So yeah, it's hard. In my case, I just cashed out my stock options and went and bought a bunch of Cisco stock, so it kind of worked out okay.